Angel Island's music kicks off the saga of Sonic 3 and Knuckles with quite the bang, and although Lava Reef has the most dramatically different Act 2 remix, Angel Island is the most pronounced example of using the two-act structure to tell a story using devices in the music theory toolkit. The opening lines of Angel Island use a tremolo, which in this instance means alternating rapidly between two notes. To notate this in sheet music, you pick the two notes to alternate between, and then establish the tremolo action with this notation. Here's the prominent use of tremolos in the opening lines of Angel Island, effectively generating a welcoming tropical vibe. Another example comes from Super Mario Sunshine's Pinna Park, and Tom Brier's triumphant sight reading of this song features great tremolos in action. The various chord sequences throughout Acts 1 and 2 of Angel Island feature a considerable amount of harmonic motion, generating lots of momentum for the saga to follow. Section C provides a prime example of a circle of fifths progression, one of the go-to chord sequences in all of tonal music. Now, the 5 chord to the 1 chord is the strongest resolution in all of tonal music, arguably the main character of chord progressions in general. And in this section of Angel Island, any given pair of adjacent chords shares this same descending fifth relationship. In a way, each pair is its own self-contained 5-to-1. Now, we've been climbing up and up the piano for demonstration purposes when actually this same chordal motion is happening within a more confined area, but all the same chordal relationships are still fully intact. The gravitational pull of the sequence is so strong and logical that we see it used widely throughout the music verse, including in Mario and Zelda. Let's look at an example of the latter in the Wind Waker's theme for Outside Island. Now, the big thematic contrast between the two acts of Angel Island is that Act 1 is a peaceful, welcoming, idyllic island, whereas Act 2 is a firestorm of chaos that sets the game's conflict into motion. From a music theory standpoint, the composer used the go-to method for expressing this good-bad contrast. Act 1's major key equals happy, while Act 2's minor key equals serious. Perhaps this night and day contrast was so obvious that the composer decided to tone down the way this was expressed in the melody scales. The major 6th and minor 7th notes serve as a sort of constant, staying the same between both acts. But it's the 3rd scale degree right here that expresses the major or minor essence depending on what act it is. Consider this flourish early on in the song, immediately after the first set of tremolos. The melody resolves here on the major 3rd. But when we arrive at this same framework in Act 2, it resolves on the more sinister minor 3rd. Later on, this melody sweeps up to touch upon the major 3rd before tumbling back down. Whereas its Act 2 equivalent uses the minor 3rd and also shifts it back a notch to make it the peak of this melody arc. And here's the most subtle example. This main phrase is preceded by 2 quick pickup notes, and the first note of it is a major 3rd. And in Act 2, sure enough, it becomes minor. Another key aspect that differentiates Acts 1 and 2 involves the lead melody's rhythmic relationship to the beat. For that opening tremolo section of Act 1, notice how we have a steady beat of 4 quarter notes per measure. And each time we go to a new note of the tremolo sequence, it lines up directly on top of a beat, for a matching framework of peaceful orderliness that's suitable for Act 1's calm normalcy. The climbing notes here are the 5th, 6th, and 7th, spanning the space of a measure. Now, in Act 2, we see this same sequence of ascending notes, 5th, 6th, 7th, but we climb up to that 7th a lot more promptly, already arriving just halfway through the measure, since with all the fiery chaos going on, we can't just proceed at a leisurely pace anymore. And notice how this time around, not all of the note changes line up directly atop beats. This is because the lead melody here is structured on increments of 3 instead of 4, represented here by segmenting them into equally sized cubes. The lead melody and the core beat are at odds with each other, each marching to the pulse of different drummers, which accurately reflects the disorder brought about by Robotnik's fiery assault. This mismatch is a good example of rhythmic dissonance, which 8-bit music theory talked about in his video on Knuckles' Chaotix. He couldn't have said it better when he explained that by putting 2 or more rhythmic layers at odds with each other, it creates a musical friction that's inherently interesting to listen to. And we see the composer go to town with this concept in section A2. What we don't know for sure is the identity of the Angel Island composer. QJimbo points out in his Sonic 3 Michael Jackson overview video that Angel Island's music was featured on the Sonic 10th Anniversary CD, and if you take the list of credited composers and do some deduction, you arrive at Tomonori Sawada, whose composer credits also includes the Sonic 3 title screen song. And although there are some reasons to be suspect of the accuracy of the credits in the 10th Anniversary CD, we can still rule out Michael Jackson's team entirely because Angel Island's music was included in Sonic Mania, and there's no way Sega would have included it in a game as late as 2017 unless they had the full rights to it. If Sawada was the composer and was hoping for his piece to make an impactful first impression, he must have been disappointed when Act 2's music got such a sloppy implementation. For starters, during Act 1, if you go into certain special stages or bonus stages, when you come out, the game incorrectly plays the Act 2 music. The reason for this oversight has to do with Sonic 3's feature of seamless act transitions. In Sonic 1 and 2, when you finished Act 1 of a zone, the screen faded to black and Act 2 loaded up separately. But in Sonic 3, you just seamlessly proceed into Act 2 with uninterrupted grace. In most levels, the Act 2 map is loaded up while you're standing still during the results screen. But in Angel Island, the transition to the Act 2 map happens at a moment in time prior to arriving at the end area. It actually occurs during this mini-boss teaser cutscene partway through Act 1. The Act 2 map is loaded up during this fiery overlay, a veil of sorts to hide the Act map transition occurring underneath. You proceed as the player through the remainder of Act 1, but from that point on, the game's code refers to the map you're on as Act 2. So if you go into a special or bonus stage, when you come out, the game thinks, okay, well, what act are we in? Act 2? Alright, play the Act 2 music. Oops. Interestingly, they partially fixed this in Sonic 3 and Knuckles by hard-coding a command for Act 1's music into this particular star post. And yet they left this issue unfixed for this special stage ring, even though it's like right there. But when it comes down to it, this mistake actually serves the game's narrative by launching into the more serious, minor-keyed vibes of Act 2 right after the fiery mini-boss cutscene. It just doesn't make sense to witness this arson firestorm turning a lush paradise into a burnt wasteland, but then just abruptly launch back into the cheerful, good times of Act 1's music. Then, when Act 2's music makes its official debut when it's actually supposed to, it gets interrupted not even 10 seconds into the level, because the stage's architecture basically forces you to enter this special stage, cutting off the Act 2 song before Section A is even done. It's understandable why the developers would want to do this. It guarantees that first-time players understand as of level 1 how to access special stages, and it makes them aware of the different gameplay mode they contain. But wow, if the composer of Act 2's music was hoping for an epic debut, they must have been disappointed to see the orchestra launch into the song prematurely in Act 1, only to have it later be interrupted a short amount into Act 2. When Act 2 finally gets its full debut, Section C includes a different use of tremolos. In the intro of the song, we saw tremolos that alternated between 2 notes, but here we see examples of single-note tremolos that just rattle away on a single note at a time. And some sharp listeners may have noticed another interesting nugget. Remember the Endless Mine rhythmic motif? Well, Angel Island features a fragment of it, lopping off the last chunk to have a tremolo take that space instead. When humming along to this song, this melody line is probably the one you hum out loud, but there's a separate melody occurring simultaneously, one of the song's many unsung heroes. It too contains the Endless Mind rhythmic fragment right here. Listening to this other melody line in isolation, courtesy of Carpathia 808, shows what a gorgeous but chilling melody it is, adding layered depth to the unfortunate destruction of Angel Island's splendor at the hands of Robotnik. Oh, the despair, the melancholy. After listening to that, there might not be anything in the world that can cheer us up and bring our spirits back to health. Actually, we're maybe gonna be alright. I'm up to season 3 of The Sopranos, really loving it so far. And how about that bass?